Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Not too long ago, I filmed a video on deconstructing jigs. And what I mean by that is I took a jig down and I talked about all the different components that go into a jig and how that can affect your overall performance, or at least should affect how you choose the jig for whatever technique or whatever location it is that you're fishing. And I got a lot of positive remarks on that where people were asking me for additional deconstructing videos. And one of the baits I had somebody ask me about specifically was a spinnerbait. And they asked that I break down the spinnerbait for you and show you all the different components. And this is a really good one to choose because there are so many different things that go into a spinnerbait that I think most anglers don't really consider when they're choosing a spinnerbait. There are a lot of unique components on these baits, and there are a lot of things that can affect the overall performance. And I'm not saying one is right versus another. There's just a lot of things to take into account for choosing the correct spinnerbait for the uh, circumstances that you're fishing in that day. So we're going to break this down. I'm going to go through all the different components, and hopefully this gives you uh, some insight into what spinnerbait to choose next time you head out on the water. Today's video is brought to you by the Deep Dive app, which will help you select the best fishing places in the lake with features like the lake level, the current flow, the top baits tool, which will help you select the best baits for certain locations throughout the lake. Whether that's a clear water, stained water, dirty water, it'll choose the best bait for that location, provide you with all the information like what structure, what retrieve, different reel, all of the information that you need to catch the fish. This is in the app. The cool part about this app, though, is it's not just based on areas. It does provide you with specific tournament winning data that has been collected to help you figure out your best choices for baits and locations for whatever region of the lake it is that you want to fish. On top of that, not only does the app provide you with best locations, it gives you water clarity as well. So maybe you're on a lake like Lake Eufaula, where there is a bunch of different water clarity located throughout the entire lake. This will help you identify the clearest portions as well as the dirtiest portions of the lake. Plus, the Deep Dive app has now added the wind effect map, which is going to take all of the different wind conditions for the past couple of days and show you what banks on the lake are being hit the hardest. They also have inflow points that show you different places throughout the lake where your water is being flushed into the lake through different ditches and creeks and rivers, providing you with high percentage places to fish and letting you know what parts of the lake are going to be the best areas after a rain. Check out the Deep Dive app to help you become a better angler. So the first component we're going to look at are the blades. In my opinion, the blades are really what make a spinnerbait, and it's one of the most complex components that go onto the spinnerbait. What I mean by that is you have a lot of different shapes, a lot of combinations, a lot of different sizes, colors. You can really have a spinnerbait blade of almost any shape and color that you'd want. So let's talk about the blades first. The majority of spinnerbait blades out there are one of these three. You've got this guy right here, which is your Colorado style. It's just a smaller circular blade. They can be large too, but it's more of a circular looking blade. Then you've got your willow or your Indiana blade, which is kind of a combination of a Colorado blade and a willow leaf blade, which is more of a longer, skinnier profile. Now, the three of these have different unique performance aspects to it. Your willow leaf blade generally tends to allow you to retrieve the bait at a faster level and keep the bait down because the blade does not have nearly as much lift as a Colorado blade. Your bigger Colorado blades have more cup to it and they generally want to rise your bait higher up in the water column. And your Indiana blade is kind of a combination. It's kind of a elongated Colorado blade that gives you more thump, which is what Colorado blades do. They really pulsate in the water, but they also lift your bait. So, a lot of times, depending on what water clarity and how fast you want your bait to move and where you want it to be in the water column is going to come down to your blade choices. Now, you also can have various combinations. In this case, I've got a Colorado blade and a Indiana blade, which is going to give me the good thump of the Colorado blade. It's also going to give me a little bit more thump than, say, your willow blade by using the Indiana blade, but I might not get as much lift as if this was a double Colorado. So it's one of those things you want to play around with. Generally speaking, if you want your bait to stay lower in the water column, a willow leaf style blade is better. If you want more thump, maybe you've got a lot of muddy water, then you'll go with more of your Colorado style blades or your Indiana style blades. And if you want to retrieve your bait at a much slower pace and keep it in the strike zone longer, that's where your Colorado style blades again come into play. If you're looking to burn your bait through the water column, your willow leaves are probably going to be good. Now, a couple other things to point out. Not only do you just have different shapes, you can also have different colors and different styles. One thing that I really like to use are blades that have something broken up on it, whether it's a logo like the Berkeley logo here, or maybe this Strike King blade where you've actually got some ribbing, maybe the tightrope spinnerbait here where you've got a split down this turtle black shell, or what would kind of be almost more of your Indiana style again. The reason for that is I don't want one large flash. If you just have one solid blade with no indents in it or no diamond pattern in it, you tend to get one big flash. Some instances you might want that. Generally speaking, I like to have my blade have some very defined lines in it, whether that's again your diamond pattern or your hammered look, or whether it's just a logo like that. And what that does is it breaks up that flash. Um, it will reduce the flash. It'll give the appearance of maybe there's potentially several bait fish versus one bait fish. And I think when talking to a lot of your best spinnerbait fishermen out there, they really like to have something on their blades that break up that flash. Now, another way to reduce your flash is to go with a painted blade. Your painted blades tend to dull down that flash, and you can improve the visibility of the bait in darker water as well. Or in some instances, you may just want to reduce that flash all completely. So you've also got various colors you can choose from. You know, if you're a Great Lakes fisherman and you like fishing spinnerbaits for smallmouth, chartreuse blades is kind of a known thing that works really, really well. So you've got a lot of different combinations out there to choose from when it comes to your spinnerbait blades. That is a very important component to choosing the correct one. After looking at the blades, another thing to take into account is your swivel. Generally, a good ball bearing swivel that connects your bottom blade is going to be what you want. You want it to spin very freely. Some low quality spinner baits out there do not have a good ball bearing swivel. And if you go to spin the blade just doesn't spin freely on its own. And from that standpoint, in the water, it's probably not going to spin as freely as well. So take that into account. Next up, you've got your wire. The wire is another very important aspect to it. A lot of different materials come into play here, different piano wires. You can have titanium wires. You can have a lot of different wires that go into a spinnerbait blade. Generally speaking, the thinner the gauge material that the wire is used out of, the more vibration you're going to get. You'll actually get some vibration out of the wire that allows the bait to move more freely. On the pause, your bait will actually flex and have a little bit of pulsating action. Really good, in my opinion. I personally like a smaller spinnerbait wire to give me more pulsating action, and it allows the bait to actually have a little bit more movement on its own. The negative to that is you tend to break more of them, meaning because it's a thinner wire, they don't hold up as well over time. And from that standpoint, uh, you might want a heavier duty wire. So if you're fishing a place that is really heavy cover, really big fish, um, maybe really dirty water, and you don't necessarily need to have more of a lifelike looking profile by that pulsating action, you might want a heavier gauge wire. Maybe you're just fishing a place that's got a lot of northern pike in it, and you don't want to go through a bunch of spinner baits. You might want a heavier gauge wire, but it's definitely something to look at. I personally really like titanium wires. One, they tend to be smaller, they have more flex in them, and they hold up really, really well. So that's something to look at as well as the material in itself. But your wire is going to be something that gives your bait a lot of fish catching ability. I truly believe the more limber the wire, The thinner the gauge wire, I tend to get more bites. Personal preference. Some people out there would probably argue with me on that. After that, you've got your head design. Most head designs are going to be a minnow shaped profile. Depending on how you want to fish your bait and the size of the bait, you may want a bait that's a little bit more streamlined if you're fishing around a lot of grass versus one that's more of your ball head style. Uh, it's not going to be the hugest impact, but if you want your bait to come through clean, you might want to be looking at something that's just got a better, more streamlined profile. When you're talking about your skirts, this is similar to jigs. So I personally like to trim my skirts down so that they're no more than a half inch below the bottom of the hook. And I also like to trim some of the material out from the bottom part of the skirt. The reason I do that is it gives the skirt much better movement in the water. It flows and undulates much better. If you leave a really thick skirt on there, it tends to just ball up and come through the water as one versus 30 different tentacles. The other reason for that has to do with the trailer. If you've got a trailer on and your skirt's too long, it can interfere with the kicking motion of the bait. The tentacles tend to get stuck to the trailer, and again, it just creates one big profiled bait versus a lot of smaller undulating skirt material pieces. So I personally like my bait to move freely in the water. But if you're looking to create a bigger profile bait or you're fishing really muddy, cold water, you might want that big profile on a big, thick skirt. But it's something to be aware of that you can definitely trim material out of your skirt. Another thing to pay attention to is the hook. One nice thing with the Berkeley spinnerbaits is they have an elongated hook. It's a very long hook. And the reason they do that is they want to reduce the need for a trailer hook. If some spinner baits come with a really short hook, and when doing that, if you have a lot of short striking, you might actually want to add a trailer hook. So looking at the overall length of the hook from the head of the bait is something to pay attention to as well. Not necessarily a right or a wrong. I do like the idea of not needing a trailer hook. And personally, I really like the fact that these are longer because it takes away some of that short striking from the fish. But it is, again, another component to pay attention to. And then the last just has to do with the skirt that you choose or the trailer that you choose. Personally, I fish spinnerbaits a lot of times without a trailer at all. I think it gives the fish a good strike zone to key in on. It reduces the overall size and the shape of the bait, and I like that. But I will fish a trailer quite frequently as well, and it's not always a boot tail, but I do like boot tails. If I'm trying to create that bigger profile I've talked about, or I'm fishing really specific strike zone areas where I want to keep my bait in the strike zone longer, I'll go with something that's got a boot tail because that will actually create drag in the water and allow me to keep my bait in the strike zone longer because I can reel it at a slower pace. You can do the same thing by going up with switching, say, from willow leaf blades to Colorado blades. You can almost like hover your bait right in the strike zone. And a trailer will allow me to do that. But I'm definitely not just boot tail trailers. I will throw a lot of different kicking baits. I'll even throw a craw on the back of these, something like a chigger craw or a pit boss I'll put on. I'm also a big fan of taking an Uncle Josh pork frog and tipping it on there, which gives some movement of a trailer, but it doesn't, and it creates a little bit of bulk, but it doesn't really change how the bait performs in the water column. They also hold up amazingly well. I'll use them for vibrating jigs and swim jigs as well at times. But the trailer can definitely be a key to allowing you to match the hatch, create a little bit more profile. It gives the fish something to key in on. A lot of different things to take into account when choosing the correct spinnerbait. I definitely recommend playing around with different spinnerbaits when on the water. You know, if you pick one up and you fish it for 15, 20 minutes and you don't have any luck on it, but you feel like the spinnerbait should be a big player, pick up a different spinnerbait that's got a different blade combination on it, different look to it. You'll find that a lot of times one spinnerbait really outperforms the other. Generally, for me, I think that has more to do with your blade combinations than anything else. But once you really get it dialed in for that particular day, you find that a spinnerbait can be a really tough bait to beat. It's just a very productive bait, allows you to cover a ton of water and be very efficient. And overall, it's a great fish catching tool. It's been around for 100 years because it catches fish, and it catches big fish too. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Hopefully it helped you. Maybe you learned a thing or two. I'm sure there's some anglers out there that are saying, I knew all this already, but there's a lot of anglers out there that don't know all of this. So if I can help you out in a little bit, it definitely makes doing videos like these worthwhile. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate all of you. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.